Hi guys, this is Mukesh Singh from Woodbine Modern School Darbhanga, and in this video I am going to explain the poem of photograph written by Shirley Tolson. So without any delay, let's get started. The poem of photograph composed by Shirley Tolson deals with the theme of the pain of loss and separation. It also deals with the theme of the contrast between the eternity of nature and the transitoriness of human beings. It expresses the idea that death is inevitable and no one can escape from the pain of loss and separation when one loses one's dear ones. The poet has used many literary devices such as imagery, alliteration, transport epithet, and oxymoron to express the desired effect. Now, I am going to explain the poem line by line. Now, let's go through the first stanza of this poem. The cardboard shows me how it was when the two girl cousins went paddling, each one holding one of my mother's hands, and she, the big girl, some 12 years or so. All three stood still to smile through their hair at the uncle with the camera, a sweet face, my mother's, that was before I was born, and the sea, which appears to have changed less, washed its terribly transient feet. The cardboard shows me how it was when the two girl cousins went paddling. Here cardboard means a thick paper, but here it refers to the photograph pasted on the cardboard that is posted on a thick paper. Earlier the photographs were pasted on thick papers to preserve them. Okay, so cardboard shows me how it was. It means the photograph. There is a photograph of the poet's mother when she had gone on a sea holiday with two of her girl cousins named Betty and Dolly. So there in the photograph, it was there that how everything was there at that time when the two girl cousins went paddling, and paddling means to walk barefoot in the shallow water. So the poet's mother, along with her two girl cousins, they were paddling. It means they were walking through the shallow water of the sea beach, each one holding one of my mother's hands, and each of the two girl cousins was holding the hands of the poet's mother from both the sides. It means the poet's mother was at the center, and she the big girl, and she here refers to the poet's mother. The poet's mother was the tallest and the eldest of the three, and she the big girl, some 12 years or so, and she was either she was 12 years old or about 12 years old. All three stood still to smile through their hair, and all three were standing still. It means they were not moving, they were standing still and quiet, and they were smiling at their uncle who was ready to take their photograph. So all three stood still to smile through their hair, and they were smiling, and their hair had flown onto their faces because of the blowing of the wind. And they were looking at the uncle, they were smiling and looking at the uncle who was with the camera to take their photograph. A sweet face, my mother's, that was before I was born. And the poet says that at that time, when her mother was 12 years old and when she had gone on a sea holiday with her girl cousins, then she had a sweet face. She looked very charming, beautiful, attractive. And that was a time before the poet was born. So that was before I was born. And the sea, which appears to have changed less, washed their terribly transient feet. And the poet says that the sea appears to have changed less. It means there is little difference. Little difference can be seen in the sea. So the sea, which appears to have changed less, washed their terribly means here extremely, transient means short-lived, and feet, it means their feet, the feet of the poet's mother and two of her girl cousins. It means they were standing or they were walking in the shallow water of the beach, and the water of the sea, which appears to have changed less, washed their feet, terribly transient feet. Terribly transient means here short-lived. So it means in these two lines, the poet brings a contrast between the eternity of sea and the transitoriness of human beings. Now, let's come to the literary devices used in this stanza. The poet has used alliteration, oxymoron, symbolism, and transport epithet in this stanza. In the third line, my mother's hands. In the two consecutive words, my mother's, alliteration is used. What is alliteration? Alliteration is a figure of speech in which the same consonant sound is repeated in consecutive words or expressions. Then there, that is, all three stood still. In the word stood still, there is also alliteration because the same consonant sound is repeated. And then again, here a sweet face, my mother's. In my mother's, alliteration is there. And the sea, here sea symbolizes eternity. Sea is an element of nature and it symbolizes eternity or a very, very slow change. Nature changes very slowly, very, very slowly. That's why the poet says that sea appears to have changed less. The time when her mother had gone on the sea holiday. So since that time, the sea appears to have changed less. No change is visible. No change is visible in the sea. But a lot of changes has come into the life of the poet and her mother. And the sea was washing their terribly transient feet. And here in this terribly transient feet, alliteration as well as transferred epithet is used. What is transferred epithet? Transferred epithet is a figure of speech in which a modifier modifies a noun. So terribly transient feet here refers to the human beings who are short-lived, whose lifespan is very short, but the nature is eternal. Now, let's come to the second stanza of this poem. The second stanza depicts the stage of the womanhood of the poet's mother as well as the childhood of the poet. Some 20-30 years later, she would laugh at the snapshot. See, Betty and Dolly, she would say, and look how they dressed us for the beach. The sea holiday was her past. Mine is her laughter, both wry with the labored ease of loss. The word meanings are also given here. So now let's start the explanation of the second stanza. Some 20-30 years later, she would laugh at the snapshot. Later means afterward in time, and generality is used in comparison with another time. So 20-30 years later, after the pleasant experience of the sea holiday which the poet's mother had experienced, after 20-30 years later, after that, she would laugh at the snapshot. After 20-30 years later, the poet's mother would laugh at the snapshot. It means seeing or looking at the snapshot, she would laugh. It means she would become very happy and she would say, see Betty and Dolly. Betty and Dolly are the two girl cousins of poet's mother. So the poet's mother would say to the poet to see in the photograph Betty and Dolly. And she would say that, and look how they dressed us for the beach. So the poet's mother would say to the poet to see that how they, it means their parents, dressed them, prepared them for the beach. The sea holiday was her past, mine is her laughter. The poet says that the sea holiday, it means the days of the enjoyment, the carefree days of her childhood, had has become a matter of past for the poet's mother. Mine is her laughter. And what has become past for the poet? The laughter of her mother, the laughter of the poet's mother has become a matter of past for the poet because her mother is no more in this world. Both wry with the labored ease of loss. Wry means to move or twist in pain with the labored ease of loss. Labored means struggle, ease, comfort, relaxation of loss. So both the poet as well as mother, both have lost something, and they are very much disappointed and grieved, and they have to struggle a lot. They have to struggle a lot to overcome their losses. Both the poet as well as her mother have to struggle very hard to overcome their loss. Both have to accept the reality. The poet the poet's mother has to accept the reality that she has become a middle-aged woman and she has lost her carefree days of her childhood. The poet has to accept the reality that she has lost her mother and now her mother is no more in this world. And as it is very hard to accept any reality, so it is also very hard for the poet and her mother to accept these realities. Now let's learn about the poetic devices used in this stanza. In the very first line of this stanza, alliteration is used, and I have already told what alliteration is in before. In the words 20, 30, alliteration is used. Then in the third line, she would say alliteration is there, and then in the last line, labored ease. In the words labored ease, oxymoron is used. Oxymoron is a figure of speech in which the two words having the opposite meanings are used together. So here labored ease, in labored ease, both the words have opposite meanings. Now let's come to the third stanza of this poem, of photograph. Now she has been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived, and of that circumstance there is nothing to say at all. Its silence silences. Now in the third stanza, the poet says that his mother has been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived. It means she died 12 years ago. And of that circumstance, here that circumstance means the circumstance of the death of the poet's mother. And of that circumstance, there is nothing to say at all. She is unable to say anything. It means whenever she thinks of the death of her mother, then she becomes speechless. She becomes very much grieved. And its silence, it means the silence caused by the death of the poet's mother has silenced her. Now, so far as the poetic device is concerned in this stanza, alliteration is used in the last line, silence silences. Now, in the web lines, the poet says that her mother died 12 years ago. The same age her mother was in the photograph, that is, she died 12 years ago. And whenever the poet thinks of her mother's death, she is unable to say anything. She cannot explain what effect she has of her, and she becomes silent. Death has silenced her mother as well as the poet also. Now, that's all for this video. We have completed this poem, and that's all. Thank you for